All right, so now we're going to talk about the skeletal system as a whole, starting off with the axial system, the axial skeleton. There are 206 bones in the human body, and so for the sake of understanding and classifying them, we divide them into two categories, the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton is going to be responsible for protecting and supporting our internal organs, and it's going to contain the skull, vertebral column, and the sternum, or the sternum/rib cage. The appendicular skeleton is going to be everything else. So we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at the axial skeleton. Here is a fantastic diagram that sort of breaks down the two skeletons, or the two components of the skeleton. This is figure 5.6. So highlighted in this sort of reddish color, we have the axial skeleton and all of the bones found there. And then we have the appendicular skeleton and the major bones found there. So spend a little bit of time reviewing this slide at the end of this chapter. The skull is going to be the most complex bony structure in the body. And it's going to have two major divisions. One, the cranial bones. The cranium is going to be formed from 8 or sometimes more flat bones fused together. It's going to protect the brain and house the structures of hearing. It also provides attachment sites for the muscles of the head, face, neck. That's all going to be found in the cranial bones. Then we have the facial bones. The facial bones are going to support, these are going to be made up of 14 different bones. These are going to support several sensory structures. And it's going to serve as the attachment site for most of those facial muscles. Figure 5.7 is another diagram that sort of breaks down all of those cranial bones, or the cranial and the facial bones that we have found inside of the skull. So here we can see the major bones of the cranium. They're going to be roughly flat bones. They're going to be fused together. And then up here in the front, we have those facial bones. Within the axial skeleton, we have the vertebral column. The vertebral column is going to consist of 26 vertebrae. There are 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic vertebrae, and 5 lower vertebrae, 5 lumbar vertebrae, lower back vertebrae. 1 sacrum and 1 coccyx. The sacrum is formed by the fusion of 5 sacral vertebrae, and then the coccyx is what's also called the tailbone. That's going to be formed by the fusion of 4 vertebrae. As we've stated before, scientists are a very creative lot when it comes to naming. So they have named the 7 cervical vertebrae, C1 through C7. The 12 thoracic vertebrae are T1 through T12. The 5 lumbar vertebrae are L1 through L5. Because the sacrum is formed by the fusion of 5 several sacral vertebrae, words are hard, it's not given a variety of names. We just have the 1 sacrum, same with the coccyx, just the 1. One other thing to mention is that there are intervertebral discs that separate the vertebrae from one another. These are just going to be pads of thick fibrocartilage that help prevent sort of the compression or prevent the grinding of those bones, those vertebrae from on top of each other. Unfortunately, they can become compressed over the years. And so it is actually possible to shrink a bit as you age or become shorter in stature as you age because of the compression of those vertebrae over time. This is why if you this compression can happen not only over time, but in the span of 24 hours. Try measuring yourself first thing in the morning when you first wake up and get out of bed, and then measure yourself again at night before you go to bed. You may find a very slight, and it'll be very slight, but a very slight difference in your height where you wake up taller than you go to sleep. And overnight, while you're not putting any pressure on your spine, it'll actually decompress and stretch out a little bit. So here is a diagram to just help us review those different parts of the vertebral column. Up here, 1 through 7, we have our cervical vertebrae. Here, 1 through 12, we have our thoracic vertebrae. Our lumbar vertebrae next, followed by the sacrum, and then the coccyx. As we said before, here are the intervertebral discs. They have that padding of fibrocartilage that helps prevent these vertebrae from grinding on each other or rubbing on each other and causing a huge amount of pain. If you've heard that term before, slipped disc, or I slipped a disc, it's actually a misnomer. It is a disc that bulges, but it doesn't necessarily move out of place. So it's not like this pad of fibrocollagen is actually going to slide out or fall out. It just starts to bulge. If it bulges inward, it can press against the spinal cord and interfere with the perception of incoming stimuli and muscle control. So if it starts to press on your spinal cord, which is found running right through here, it can cause damage or loss of muscle control. If it bulges outward, right here, it can press against the sciatic nerve and cause painful inflammatory condition known as sciatica. So that is what a slipped disc is. Next up on our axial column, we have our sternum and rib cage. So our sternum is going to be this bone right here, also known as our breastbone, and it is going to be attached to our ribs, attached to our ribs by thick pads of cartilage. There are going to be 12 pairs of ribs attached at the back of the cage, at the back of the rib cage to the thoracic vertebrae. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The last two pairs don't actually attach to the sternum. These are what we call floating ribs. These two right down here, 1, 2, because they do not actually attach to the, 1, 2, there we go. There are 2 pairs. Because they don't actually attach to the sternum by this thick cartilage layer. So those are called our floating ribs. And that's it for our axial skeleton. Let me know if you have any comments or questions.